All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Sean Lowery Show podcast. I'm here with Tim Box, the TED Talk superstar. What's up, Tim? How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. That's a good intro. TED Talk superstar. I like that one.
Yes. So for the people who don't know you, quick intro. Just a little quick one.
Okay, I'm a mind coach, remedial hypnotist, so kind of like a hypnotherapist. That's my trade. I talk a lot about anxiety for a couple of reasons. One being that's what most of my clients are dealing with when I see them one-to-one, and also because I went through a fair bit of social anxiety when I was a little bit younger. I wrote a book about anxiety, did a TED Talk about anxiety. So yeah, I talk about anxiety a lot.
You are an expert on anxiety.
You could say that. I definitely specialize in that.
We'll say that. Don't fact check us. No. I am very fascinated by the topic of anxiety. I don't consider myself a very anxious person. And I've had to work on that. And at the end of the podcast, my producer Brandon's going to ask a couple questions, and he's somebody who has dealt with anxiety a little more, so you get a little of both. But just because I'm interested in the topic. Just because I don't feel like I'm somebody who has anxiety, it's like one of my favorite things to think about, talk about. I'm fascinated by it. How would you define anxiety?
Okay, this is an interesting question, because the thing is, when people haven't suffered anxiety to a high level, it can be really difficult for them to understand what people are actually going through. And there's definitely this disconnect between people that would say they suffer with it and people that really haven't suffered with it, because it's almost like we equate what we regard anxiety as what everyone's suffering with or dealing with, and so we can't quite empathize with it. It's difficult to completely empathize when you haven't been there. But in terms of defining anxiety, it's an emotion. That's the thing I would say first off. Let's get back to basics. And it's really, if you was to say, fear is the emotion that says stay away from the danger. Anger is the emotion that says go and right the wrong that has been done you. Anxiety is the emotion that says pay attention to this important thing right now. And it could be for a number of reasons why we feel it, why we're finding ourselves focused on it. But that's the purpose of it, is to focus our attention in a certain area for whatever reason that might be, whether it be about our safety, our future happiness, all that sort of thing. It's kind of, it's that thing, whatever it might be, whether it's visceral in terms of a feeling or whether it's just a thought process, it draws us towards the important pressing issue.
Worry? It's like a worry?
It can be worry. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people that when I started out in this business, the word anxiety wasn't used much by clients, certainly not in the UK. It was something we're all still dealing with the same sorts of things, but people would say, oh, I'm worrying, or I'm stressed, or I'm overwhelmed. Right. They didn't necessarily stroll in and say, Tim, you got to help me with anxiety, because it wasn't necessarily the thing we were defining our emotional issues as. But I think these days, there's a lot of talk about anxiety. A lot of awareness has been built, especially with the nature of online content and social media. So as a result, we're a little bit better educated, but we're also, as inevitably with social media, we're also slightly miseducated at times as well. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I always say like one of my greatest strengths is like the ability not to worry. I feel like it's a superpower. And like I'm someone who like won't even lock my doors, or won't even if I think there's a low percentage of something happening, I like eliminate it from my mind. And I've definitely been somebody who's been accused of this in private conversations, even public conversations, that like I don't understand the empathy of it. And I will say I spent a lot of time thinking about it, or engaging in the subject, and trying to understand it from other people's points of view. Now, do you think that it's starts at like a biological level? Some people are more prone to it.
Okay, that's kind of a deep dive topic in terms of what the origins of it are. I mean, I know a lot of people will regard it as genetically driven, and there's evidence to, I say evidence, we don't really know, but there's evidence to suggest some people are more genetically predisposed to higher anxiety than others, based on certain research that's been done. But even those people that would claim a genetic origin, it doesn't happen without the emotional driver, without the situation that we're perceiving. Yeah,
that's what I've always like kind of had the rebuttal with, is like, well, it seems like anxiety always ties to a situation. Like
Yeah,
if
a
somebody
lot of the
is
time,
doing
yeah.
bad in life, loses their job, that, oh, now you have anxiety. It's not a coincidence.
Yeah,
I think it's
and
based
also
upon
I think
situations.
it's when we've been through a lot as well. We learn our emotional responses at quite an early stage. It's really
Mm.
sort of early childhood level that we're learning how to respond to the world. And you get a lot of people when they haven't been through anything. I say haven't been through anything like particularly challenging, and I'm not trying to dismiss what other people have been through and trying to, speak for other people. But for example, I've seen a lot of people in the last 12 months who are suddenly extremely anxious when they haven't been before, simply because, well, they've never had to deal with a global pandemic before. So now there's
It's a new
certain
one.
thoughts going on, that weren't necessarily fired up before, and now this, for the first time, they're struggling. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that when we go through that first struggle, that the people that haven't been through, the what would you call it, the trauma when they've been brought up, the real struggles, the difficulties, they can be a little bit more prone to the kind of the ebbs and flows of the tide in the future, because they're not necessarily as resilient as those that have really been through the mill and
Right.
have toughened up in that sense.
How would you define going through trauma? I mean, I think my dad died of ALS when I was 12, and I had to move schools a lot, and I always say, like, those were tough times for me. I made it through, and
Yeah.
I went through something. Now, okay, I moved around schools in America. Like, it wasn't that bad compared to other people. Like, if I look at somebody who has had a much worse life, I don't know, a soldier or someone in Africa with no food, mine's nothing. So, like,
Yeah.
is it how
I
you
think
frame it in your head?
Yeah,
Or
I
is
think a
it,
lot of people will use the word trauma for very extreme cases. For me, I class trauma as any event or experience that caused us to develop an emotional strategy in response to it, going
mm,
forward. And so it could be a really extreme strategy. And it could be a
mm,
real state of confusion as well. A lot of the time when we're dealing with our emotional responses, we don't agree with them. We think they're inappropriate, but the part that's driving our emotions is in a state of confusion, and that's where the disconnect happens.
so it's
But so
emotional
for me,
reaction, emotional
sorry.
reaction, an
Yeah,
emotional.
that's it. I think I don't just reserve trauma for the actual things that we would say are real life-changing situations. Anything that causes us to have a new emotional strategy going forward for similar
Mm,
situations, I would say is potentially we could regard as a traumatic learning. Obviously, there's certain things we would say are the higher levels, and for certain people going through, like war zones and
hmm.
displacement and things like that. Yeah, we would definitely recognize that as trauma, but also I
Right.
wouldn't dismiss the what we might call the lower level stuff. Just something
Okay.
happened, it created a sense of confusion at that time, and as a result, we now have an emotional response attached to similar circumstances.
Like, I even think, and I'm just winging this, like a strategy would be, if say you have had a pretty easy life. It hasn't been that easy. I mean, life is
Yeah,
hard. You've had days where you've had traffic. You've had
yeah,
days where, like, you were supposed to have something happen, it didn't happen. You've had
yeah.
plans that didn't go through. Like, do you think if somebody has had not that big of traumatic situations, that
Mm,
if they take their minor situations and practice their emotional response, they
mm.
could then improve their brain upon how it works when a real trauma does come?
Oh, absolutely. We can definitely prepare ourselves for that. When we can't prepare ourselves for everything,
Right.
that's why we discourage worrying. That's what worrying is, isn't it? Trying to prepare
Yes.
ourselves for the unexpected or the unpredictable. But we can certainly learn to control our emotional responses and interact with them a little bit better. So you could argue, if we've not really been through a lot, you could say, okay, I haven't yet had that bit of learning that says, wow, the world can throw me challenges that overwhelm me. I haven't found that out yet. Yeah. But also, I haven't found out that in those times when I feel like I'm becoming overwhelmed, I actually do come out the other side of it. So there's a kind of a double-edged thing here. What we learn in that moment, we if we do it right, I think, yeah, and this is kind of, I'm not trying to be absolute about this, but if we do it right, there's always positives to learn from each experience. Yeah. And I'm not trying to say to people who've been through horrible things, just look on the bright side. That's what you need to do. That's not it at all. But I am thinking the things that I've been through that have challenged me, I believe it makes me a little bit more resilient and puts a little bit of faith in me and my ability to overcome the unexpected and the unpredictable and the undeserved. So I know I can't stop life throwing me challenges. As you rightly point out, life is challenge. That's what it's all about.
Of course.
But I do know that I can probably rely on me to find a way through those challenges. Even in those times when I'm like, well, I really don't know how I'm going to deal with this. I probably have a bit of faith in me that in some way I'm going to find a solution, because ultimately we don't feel anxious about the thing. We feel anxious about our perceived ability to cope with the thing.
Yeah.
So it's always about what have I got in me that can get me through this? Yeah?
Right. So like, correct me if I'm wrong here. I think that a young person that's listening that hasn't had any, if you ask them, have you had a traumatic life? They say no. Like, manufacture some problems to practice your response to it. You have to be consciously thinking about, I'm going to train this emotional response, even if you haven't had any. Like, because the people who maybe got some anxiety during COVID, who never had problems in their life, they just never practiced, or never thought about it.
There's a limited amount we can practice emotionally. I would suggest, but we can actually bring on board strategies to deal with the higher level stuff. Yeah. The bottom line here is we're making mistakes all the time. We have to accept that. Yeah. We're not gonna go into a situation and say, I prepped perfectly, I performed perfectly, aren't I amazing? Yeah, that doesn't happen. We make mistakes every day of our life. That's what learning is about. Yeah. But if we beat ourselves up for those mistakes, we probably don't learn anything. We just end up feeling rubbish about ourselves because we beat ourselves up for all our failures. If we take our mistakes and say, right, that's excellent. Even though that didn't go right, I just learned something I didn't know 5 minutes ago. As a result of that, I now become the most experienced version of me there's ever been. So potentially the most resourceful version of me. So what that means I can take from that experience is that I can now move forward with a greater level of confidence in me because I have just grown beyond what I was before.
So what I kind of just heard you say was, look on the bright side. Like you kind of, I mean, a little bit like, okay, I had a bad situation. Like, okay, but now on the other end, I learn from it. I'm going to be confident from it. I mean, and before you said, and I have a point here. Before you said, I don't want to say like, no matter how bad your life is, just look on the bright side. Like, I almost kind of disagree in a way, and I'm sure I'll get some flack for that. Like, you should look on the bright side. So I recently, and this is my point. I recently had like a big like a moment, like a rant that I went on social media about this topic of toxic positivity.
Okay, yeah.
Somebody like responded to me on Twitter about because I was about toxic positivity, and I got like enraged because I think that positivity is like a great way to deal with things. Do you think positivity can be toxic?
I think when people are pressing us to just look on the bright side, be positive, find the positives in it, when we're in the midst of, in the depths of it, then I think it can be harsh and it can be unhelpful. And here's the thing, when I'm working with people, my first thing is to understand them. I've got to listen to them and hear them. Because I've got to kind of try and help talk around a bit of their mind into doing something different.
Yes.
Yeah. And if you'll know this yourself, if you disagree with somebody, most disagreements end up with two people giving their opinion repeatedly, maybe in turns, maybe at the same time, depending. Yeah. But the other isn't listening to the other because they're saying, no, wait a minute, you haven't heard me, because I feel like if you fully understood me, you would adopt my opinion. So clearly you haven't heard me. Yeah.
And then walls go up and it's a bad conversation.
Exactly. So our job really is to say, okay, what's going on with you? Because even though I might not feel how you're feeling, I might even struggle to connect or understand it. But if I can recognize there's a good reason why you're feeling this way, then maybe we can start to talk on that level. Yeah. So I will have conversations with people and there's a part of their mind, not their conscious part, but their subconscious part, telling me, it's correct, it's appropriate to feel incredibly anxious about X or Y situation. Yeah. Now, before I can explain to that part why it doesn't have to, I've probably got to hear that part and understand why it's currently doing it. Yeah.
Yes.
So I might So, for example, my anxiety was social anxiety. I got a fair bit of bullying the later years of my school years, and I'd kind of always been that nervous, anxious kid in the run up to it anyway. So, you know, you could argue my behaviors were heading that way and my responses were heading that way. But I know that at that time, social acceptance, teen years, moving into it's the number one priority.
Number one.
Yeah, that's why people start smoking, because it's cool to smoke even though it's going to kill us. So we literally put our physical health second to social acceptance. So at that time, any negativity I was receiving from people around me was potentially world crushing. Because this is my survival strategy, is having people like me. Okay, now when I left that environment, I might recognize I don't need everyone to like me anymore. You know, there's 7.5 billion people on the planet. If the person in front of me don't like me, there's probably someone just behind them who might do. Yeah. And also my happiness, my survival doesn't depend on the person in front of me liking me anymore. So I can reason that through, but until I understand why the part that's doing the anxiety had that strategy on board, that part won't even listen to me about that. Yeah. So I have to recognize, I can understand why this guy in here is saying, stay away from people. They're bad news. They'll give you a bad time and it will lead to disaster. Yeah. But if I can understand that part, it doesn't mean I have to agree with it, but I need to understand its point of view, where it's coming from. Okay. So I can't even remember toxic positivity. That's right. Yeah. So if somebody says to me, just be positive, I can understand their point of view, but until they understand why I'm currently feeling very negative, I'm not going to adopt it or listen to it, because you haven't listened to me and my journey and my story. So I'm still too invested with getting heard first and foremost. This is the journey for a lot of people dealing with high anxiety levels, is that they fight so hard to get this feeling recognized as genuine and not just, I'm being a bit of a snowflake now. That they're so invested in the validation of the feeling, they don't even get the option to think about how they can change it. Because if they changed it, all those people saying, I told you just needed to be positive. So it's almost like
they don't want to give them that validation.
Well, exactly. And suddenly then what was I wrong all along? The fact that it could be changed, does that mean now that those people that were just saying, just cheer up, they were right? You know, it puts us in an impossible position. Right.
So I can understand toxic positivity as far as just being an asshole or a wanker. Just like, just being like, there you go. Just like, I'm not listening to you. Be positive. You'll be fine. That is toxic disattention to the person. That is toxic, not paying attention, not putting any effort towards caring about the person's feelings. So like, that's not positivity's fault. That's just a jerk. That's just a person. So like, and I can see that. Oh, you're fine. Be positive. I don't care about your problems. If you cared about that person, you would sit there, engage in their problems. And even if you're just faking it in a way, which probably isn't good, you should genuinely listen. And then just respond back to them. I understand how you feel. Maybe look at it from their point of view and then try like a more positive approach. That would be better. So maybe the people that are against toxic positivity had some asshole say to them, you'll be fine. Just be positive.
I think that probably what we're talking about in essence here is it's okay to push the positivity, the positive outlook agenda, because ultimately that's what we want from life is to see positive things. But it's not okay to in some way imply that it's wrong to be feeling negative right now, because that's when it becomes toxic, is when I'm actually saying the fact you're negative, you're either doing it wrong or there's something wrong with you because of that. That's when it becomes a problem. It's about not accepting the way someone feels. It's okay to say, look, I've got an idea here. Because this is basically what I'm doing, isn't it? I'm saying I've got an idea. We might be able to change this. But I'm absolutely not saying you're wrong to be feeling this way right now. I'm saying let's take that feeling, which is valid, which is completely understandable, which we can even trace the origins of. But let's take it and see what we can do with it differently, because I don't want you there suffering, feeling anxious, feeling bad about yourself and about your situation in life.
Right.
Yeah, I'd much
Yeah.
rather we work towards the solution. You know?
Yeah, and when I made a video like responding to defending positivity, I started it off by saying like these are all the things that are terrible in my life. I talked about all my problems, all the things going wrong with my business, and like it was like did well. I think like people like seeing that. Yes, you're not just being a jerk. You're acknowledging that things are bad sometimes, of course.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the key to it. So, I mean,
I think,
it's
I think look,
stuff.
if we're listening to each other, if we're trying to understand each other, then we start on a good foot, don't we? You know, I think it's when we just end up shouting each other's opinion at each other. Then, but there's too much of that on social media as well, I should say. Because I'm and apologies if I'm going somewhere we didn't want to go, but I think about this a lot these days because a lot of people I'm recognizing are suffering at the moment because of their exposure to social media and the polarization of opinion. You know, you've got a lot going on in the States in terms of the opinions polarizing now. And there's all that sort of stuff's going around. And day to day, we probably encounter a fair few people who have a completely opposite opinion to us, telling us their opinion. So yeah, potentially it ends up just being, I don't know, we have to deal with a lot more input than we used to.
Right.
Yeah?
I think it's really interesting that you said about the social anxiety at that age, 12, I don't know, maybe 12 to 19 or something like that. Because
around there.
Because when I moved to new schools at that age, it was like, I didn't care about anything except for like being accepted. And because I think it is important to, and I think you said this in your TED Talk, it was like one of the most important things is I don't care what other people think about me. But that's kind of hard. It might be easier when you're an adult.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when you're a kid, you know, when you're a teenager, I won't be able to convince you that it doesn't matter what other people think of you because it freaking does, you know, at that age, it really does. Because when you think about it, you're put in a classroom with people. You're like, okay, you're going to be with these people for the next maybe 6 or 7 years. So you better find your friends and work out who your enemies are, because otherwise you're going to have a bad time, you know? So it's not like you can simply decide, no, I don't like the people in this room. I'll go into another room and hang out with other people.
As an adult, you can do that.
Yeah, you don't have autonomy over your decisions when you're that age. Yeah. For example, when I was getting bullied, I couldn't just say, you know what, Mum, I'm not going into school today. I fancy a day off. I'll have a break from it, I think, because I didn't get to make that decision. I would have to change the opinion of the person who was in charge of that decision, which was my parents. Yeah. And how would I do that? I don't know. I probably, the only way we would do it is to have an emotional meltdown to the point where they're like, maybe you shouldn't go into school or to throw up or something like that. Right. So acceptance on that, because we can't decide just now I'm out, thanks. We can't do that. So we have to do, our strategies involve, right, let me fit in with this group of people. So I've got my tribe. So that I'm in the center of the herd, so I won't get picked off by the lions. Yeah, it's the people on the outside that have no tribe that leave themselves vulnerable to attack. It's like, you know, wildebeest on the African plains. Yeah. The ones on the outskirts are vulnerable to the lions picking them off. Yeah, right. I've no idea if I've got my natural history correct there or not, but you know what I mean.
I get your general point.
Like an evolutionary thing. Whereas in the real world, when we leave school, all our strategies have been developed out fitting in and being part of the gang, part of the crowd. Now, what's our job? To stand out, so that the person that we're competing against for the sale or the job or the promotion, so that we stand out, we shine above them.
Wow.
You know? When we're in the club looking for someone to hook up with, we want to stand out above our mate who's with us at the time, our friend, you know. Wow. So it's like all our strategies at that age become kind of sort of redundant, you know. They're not as effective, you know.
I've never thought of that. I've always thought that age was because of like a maybe an underdeveloped mind, and maybe that's part of it. But that's so true. The fact that you can't pick what you do, so like you are forced to be in that situation. So that's a pretty anxious situation. Being a teenager is tough.
I mean, it's exactly that. I was very aware at certain times in my school life that I was in a room with people that really hated me and would ideally like to see me fail quite badly. Yeah. And now,
not a good feeling.
Not a good feeling, because I've got to stay there, haven't I? I've got to literally exist there, and I've got to try and get on with my goals in terms of my work and my advancement with all of this literally next to me. Whereas if I'm in that situation in the real world now, I will go somewhere else, because
You can
why
go to
would I
another
stay in that
club. You can
environment?
go to another
You
club.
know?
You can go to another. You can go to the
Exactly.
club down the street. Oh
Exactly.
wow, that's
So I no longer have to change me to fit in with what other people want. My job now is to be me. And you know what? The people who like me will find me,
wow,
because
and
something
that's
about what I'm saying will resonate. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's a powerful. But kids don't have that option. Wow, it is tough to be a kid. It is tough to be a kid, but
It is.
maybe
Yeah.
that can be your situation. You overcome as emotional trauma that as an adult you can handle it.
Yeah.
One of the things I love that you said,
Mm.
and I'm interested in your opinion, is like, because a lot of people would disagree. It said, you said you refused to believe that you were ill when you
Yeah.
were feeling anxious. Like the
Yeah.
diagnosis, the medicine, the excuse
Mm.
to yourself that, well, I, if you have a broken arm, you
Mm.
can't play quarterback. It's not your
Mm.
fault. You have a broken arm. So it's like, I think people kind of like to be like, yes, I have a sickness. So
Mm.
like I'm anxious, but I'm always, and it's a touchy
Mm.
area with people. And that's
Yeah.
where maybe I like the toxic positivity, like, no,
Well,
dude, like, yeah,
yeah,
but
I say this in the talk. The two traditional opinions are: it's an illness, I can't do anything about it. All I can do is manage it, or it's all in your head. Just get over it. Yeah, there doesn't seem to be the middle ground. I tend to
mm-hmm,
inhabit the middle ground. Yeah, I don't believe we are genetically, medically predisposed to the point where we're helpless. Yeah, but I also know this isn't. It's real. Yeah, we're not. We don't want to
it's
feel this
real.
way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
The
Yeah,
mistake is that if it isn't medical or chemical, then surely we can just change it. And that's the middle ground. There is, look, it's not, we're not locked in for good, but it's not an easy puzzle to solve. Yeah,
right,
it's like saying to somebody, here's a
right,
Rubik's cube. Why on earth
right,
can't you solve it? I know all the colors go together correctly. Go on, do it. Do it now then.
right,
Just do it. Just decide. You're choosing not to solve it, aren't you? And it's not like that. It's like when
right.
I learned to solve a Rubik's Cube, but I sure as hell had to do a lot of tutorials and someone had to show me how to do it. I didn't work it out. And working out anxiety can be a bit like that. It's like trying
That's
to work it out on your own. It can feel a little bit like an unsolvable puzzle. But when you get the right guidance in the right way, you can change it and you can get control of it. And that's why I did the talk. That's why I did the book, because of all
right,
the things that I work with people on, the thing that achieves the best results generally is understanding. Yeah, anxiety
right.
is the thing that gives the best results from simply understanding it, so that we're
Yes.
no longer afraid of it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I love what you're doing when you talk about the middle ground, because that's probably makes you great to communicate to people who are
Mm.
feeling that. You're saying, I understand. Do you still, through being the middle ground and
Mm.
like understanding their feelings, like to eventually try to get the message across that it is not an illness,
Yeah,
like
but
a
that's
cancer
actually the
would be?
first. That's the first thing. That's
Okay,
step
first
one,
thing.
is realizing that it's not an illness. Yeah.
Do you ever get
So
pushback?
people,
Do you get pushback to that if it's the first thing you
um,
say?
not the people I see, because that's why
Okay,
they come to see me, because they
true,
realize it isn't as well.
true.
But to be fair, I don't get a lot of pushback in terms of when I put the message out on social media or in my marketing, because I think people recognize. So people will tell me I've been diagnosed with like generalized anxiety disorder, or and a disorder is generally the name that we give it. But
Hmm.
and that's okay. I can bear that name. I can agree.
Yes, it's not disease, it's disorder.
Yeah, because disorder, the definition of disorder is a state of confusion.
It's like the Rubik's
Okay. And
cube. It's like the Rubik's cube all mixed up.
yeah, exactly. And I
Yeah.
think people think disorder means a permanent state, and it doesn't. It means at the moment we're in a state of confusion. And our understanding and our emotional state shifts all the time. It's transient. Yeah. So as long as we accept that whatever's going on with us is a temporary state of affairs, and that if we clear up the confusion, it will no longer be the case, then we can work with that. And this is the thing: if somebody comes into me with the belief they have a medical condition or an illness that simply can't be, I don't know, cured in inverted
Right.
commas, yeah, then we can't do any work, can we? Because I'm not got any medicine for
Exactly.
them.
Yeah.
I'm not going to inject them with anything. I'm not going to try and
There is
rearrange.
medicine.
Yeah.
What's your
Well,
take
there
on
is,
that?
but I haven't got it. I'm not going to be using medicine because I'm not a doctor.
Okay,
So I'm going to
perfect.
be talking about understanding. That's how we deal with it, where I am. So yeah, I think it can be a difficult message to hear, because it makes you feel like, oh, so have I been told the wrong thing, or have I been acting the wrong way all this time? And I don't think that's the case at all. every emotional strategy you have on board at one point was the best and only strategy you had available to you in terms of the situation you were in. And yes, sometimes we end up with confused responses. That's okay, because as I said before, we make mistakes every day. We can allow them to happen. And as long as we embrace them and learn from them, we can continue to grow. So I think it's a difficult conversation to have with people.
But you can say to them, you do have a disorder.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm happy. I'm not going to deny that. You would traditionally, I would say it's not a condition, not a disorder, not an illness. But these days I'm happy with the definition disorder, because I understand what disorder means.
Yeah.
And as long as we understand this is a state of confusion caused by something in our life, whatever we've been through, be it short term or long term, that we've developed an emotional strategy in sympathy to, then we can work with it and we can change it.
Yeah. Wow. You know? So the people that you work with, do they always like have some triggering moment, or like, because there's other things you can do, right? Like exercise. How does exercise factor into like this conversation? I think you paused for a sec. Okay, yeah. All right, got you back. So like, right, if you emotional trauma, how does like something simple like exercise and healthy diet play into the conversation?
Well, okay, speaking as not a nutritionist, but somebody that recognizes the impact of not looking after your basic healthcare. So, eating properly, drinking properly, sleeping properly, resting properly, all that sort of thing. Whenever we face a challenge, we do this thing called a cognitive assessment, which is like a little self-audit. You decide, do I have the resources to deal with this challenge? Okay. And I don't necessarily mean climbing Mount Everest. I just mean, taking the rubbish out or getting to that meeting on time, any sort of challenge, anything that we face. And if the answer comes back, yes, I do have the resources, all good, minimal emotional impact. If the answer comes back, no, I don't have the resources, then that can trigger high anxiety, because we might find ourselves going into the threat response, which is filling with adrenaline, fight or flight, let's overcome this challenge somehow kind of thing. But one of the big metrics that come into play in terms of assessing whether I have the resources is how close to my best am I? I'll tell you the three because it will contextualize it a bit. First, how big is the challenge? Is it huge? Are there many of them? Have I done them before? All that sort of thing. Second, how good am I at dealing with challenges? Self-esteem. Am I great at this, or am I on my knees? Am I rubbish? Final one, how close to my best am I? And that's about rest, nutrition, looking after yourself. You might be the best problem solver in the world, never struggled with any challenges, looking at a challenge that you can handle because you've done it hundreds of times. But if you're at your lowest ebb, if your battery charge is at like 5%, you still might doubt your ability to deal with it. And as a result, you may experience higher levels of anxiety as the doubt about the success of the endeavor kicks in.
That makes a lot of sense, because you hear that exercise is like a medicine for anxiety. And I feel like some people might be like, okay, so if I'm anxious, like start doing push-ups. Maybe that might help a little, but it's more about being at your best,
absolutely. There's two things that I think exercise help with anxiety wise. Okay. We've already mentioned one, which is we feel good when we've exercised, we've done something positive for our health. So we feel good about ourselves. If you do a small workout every day, you probably by the end of the week feel a lot better about yourself, just self-esteem wise, than if you just sat on the couch all week, Exactly. So it does good for your self-esteem. The second thing is that when we're feeling incredibly anxious, our physical response is the threat response. If we feel like we're under threat, we go into fight or flight in some minor or major way. Okay, so the heart rate quickening, the breath shallowing, and the muscles going into tension, it's the perfectly healthy response to potential threat. You're getting ready to take action. The number of times people have described to me massive anxiety, and I remember this myself. You've got to go for a walk. You've got to stand up. You've got to walk around the room or something. Your body's trying to get you moving. So if you start to channel that energy into exercise, you can disperse the adrenaline that's building up, and it'll make you feel better as a result. It will answer the call to action, if that makes sense. Yeah?
Answer the call to action, right? Your body's biologically responding to a threat. And
Absolutely.
if you work up a sweat, that's the response. And then you can be a normal state.
This is I hear people all the time saying, how can I manage the physical symptoms of anxiety? That really, there are no physical symptoms of anxiety. Anxiety is the emotion. The physical symptoms you're feeling are your body going into the threat response, which is trying to get you to take action, which is appropriate for what you perceive the situation to be, which is, I am under threat in some way right now.
Wow.
So the physical symptoms are actually a separate response called the threat response. We don't need to manage the physical symptoms, because that's just putting a plaster over the problem. We need to heal the emotional drivers, if you get what I mean. We have to change our understanding so that we no longer trigger the threat response.
Wow. That's powerful. That's powerful. It's just important to understand. Like, there might be some people who just don't understand that. And is it hard for people to like break that down?
Yeah.
I'm sure, right? Like, but that's what you have to do. You have to understand where the feelings are coming from.
So probably for so long, we've looked at that physical response and said, oh, here comes my anxiety. It's almost like we've stopped thinking of anxiety as the thing I'm anxious about, the actual situation. And we've started thinking of it as the physical response. I'll ask people, when I'm doing talks, what is anxiety? And I'll get opinion. Number of times people say, oh, it's a crushing in the chest, or it's a racing of the heart. They'll just describe the physicality of it, the visceral sensations associated with it. But that's not anxiety. Anxiety is the emotion. It's the situation that we're responding to, if you know what I mean. It's our response to the situation. The physical stuff is just your body being completely congruent with how you perceive the situation to be, It's
kind of like if you're in love, you feel like you're like lifted off the ground.
Exactly.
It's the same concept. The love is the emotion, but the feeling. But that's like that's like a panic attack in that sense, right? And that's like, if someone has the physical, they call it a panic attack. Yeah. And but it's based on the emotion, right?
Well, that's the thing. I think that there's a thing about panic attacks. And again, I deal with a lot of panic attacks from people because it's such a common thing. It's sort of like, it's anxiety dialed up to 11, isn't it? It's that I have to do something now or I might die, Most people, their first panic attack, they end up in the emergency room because they've mistaken it for a heart attack or a stroke or a seizure or something like that, because the physical sensations are so strong. But the problem there is that then we perceive any potential panic attack in the future to be potentially life-threatening. So a bit of our mind says, right, that might kill us because it nearly killed us that first time. And the problem here is that all of those early symptoms of panic, like your heart missing a beat or speeding up, your breath getting a bit shallow, feeling a bit lightheaded, maybe a tight chest, all of those sorts of symptoms, we kind of do those nearly every day anyway, on some level, because our body regulates itself when it's digesting food and pumping our blood around our system and dealing with our respiratory system and things like that. So, and we don't notice it. As human beings, we tend to not notice as our heart changes, the heart rate changes, because it doesn't matter.
There's no emotion.
We go past without us. We don't attach any meaning to it. We consciously don't notice it. But if we've suffered a panic attack, then a bit of our mind says, well, hang on, what the hell is that? Yeah. Something's shifting here. Is that a panic attack? Yeah. And you start to ponder the possibility that you're about to have what you perceived last time as life-threatening. And what's the appropriate response to a life-threatening situation? Panic.
Wow.
So you trigger the thing that you most fear as a result.
I understand. So I think this is a good time to bring in Brandon. So Brandon's my producer, and he found you. He was inspired by your TED Talk, and we thought we might be a good balance because I'm somebody who doesn't really deal with anxiety. He's kind of dealt with it a little bit, and he had a couple questions for you.
Go for it, Brandon.
Hey, what's up, Tim? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you well. Yeah.
So just a little backstory on me. I've had about 3 panic attacks in the past 2 months. I've actually in the past, I went to the emergency room about 3 times because of a panic attack, and it turned into physical symptoms for me, like the heart racing, heart pain, and just adrenaline rush, flight or flight.
Yeah.
Y'all were talking about health anxiety. I mean, talking about anxiety and how it turns into the physical symptoms.
Yeah.
Like, how can I basically overcome the physical symptoms of anxiety and knowing
Okay,
that
this is the thing. This is probably the most common trigger that people experience is physical symptoms that are then, oh look, I'm anxious today. The problem we have, right? And I don't know if this resonates with you, because this was where I was at some point. You would wake in the morning and you'd be like, right, how anxious am I today? Let me just check for my anxiety, because I know if I'm anxious, I'm going to have a difficult day. If I'm not, I'll have a good day. And of course, scanning to see if we're anxious is quite an anxious thing to do. Yeah. So it's like, if we're looking around the corner for that monster that we don't want to see, that's anxiety inducing right there, you know. So we kind of create it by looking for it. And it's the easiest thing in the world for me to sit here and say, you just need to ignore it, Brandon. Yeah. But I know you can't, because it's pressing. Yeah. The point I would say is, when we have negative feelings like that, difficult physical symptoms, and especially if it goes into the panic state, I encourage people to think of it like that roller coaster that we really didn't want to get on. Yeah. So I always use the example, there's a roller coaster in one of our theme parks in the UK called Thorpe Park, and it's a Saw ride. It's themed on the Saw movies. And there's one bit where it goes right up literally vertically and drops you down inverted, and it's just horrific. I don't know why I went on it. It was a bad mistake. Yeah. And it was absolutely terrifying. And I actually remember as it went to the last big climb, as it's going slowly up that thing, I remember thinking, can I get off here? Is it possible that I could actually get off if I really wanted to? You know, I was there on that sort of thing. But I didn't go into a panic state. I was terrified, and I was, fairly vocal, I think, in my screams. But I didn't go into a panic state because I knew I'd be alive at the end of it. There was no bit of me saying, this is so scary, I think I'm going to die. Yeah. And this is why I encourage people with panic attacks to recognize, even though it feels like you're dying, you won't. You've only got to talk to paramedics about this. They see thousands and thousands of panic attacks in the course of their career. None of them have seen a fatal one. Yeah, there's nobody with a label on their toe in a morgue, cause of death, panic attack. Yeah, it just feels like we're going to die. When we recognize this is going to be a few minutes of really unpleasant feelings, and then I'll get on with my day, then the funny thing is our body now no longer needs to go into a fight or flight mode, because there's nothing about the situation that is threatening our existence. Okay. And I'm not pretending that this revelation will suddenly fix everything. Wouldn't it be nice if it did? Who knows? Let's not rule it out. But the point being here is that when your mind understands this on a subconscious level, so on your belief level, I know this is just going to be pain in the arse, and then I'll get on with my day. The funny thing is, it doesn't become that pain in the arse. It doesn't go into panic. I remember the first client that I really talked to about this, when I sort of felt I understood it, and I brought it into the work I was doing. And she came to me because she was suffering 3 or 4 panic attacks a day. And to be fair, that's the sort of people that I'm seeing. The worst one I've seen is a guy who was suffering 20 or 30 panic attacks a day because he had COPD. So being short of breath was a freaking big deal for him. Yeah. But the lady I'm talking about, she was 3 or 4 a day. We spoke about this, and we did a session together. We had a chat. And that was the main truth that we wanted her to understand, is that no matter how many panic attacks you have, that is not going to be the end of you. Yeah. Whatever your story of your life becomes, it won't be died of a panic attack. Yeah. And then she went away, and we did a follow-up session. I think it was a couple of weeks later, and she hadn't had any panic attacks, from 3 or 4 a day to none at all. She said there was only one day when I thought I might have, and it was when she was driving on the motorway, and she suddenly felt her heart going, like she recognized it as, well, that's a warning sign there. And so she pulled over to the hard shoulder of the motorway, and her boyfriend, who was in the passenger seat, said, do you need me to drive us home? Because that was pretty much the standard strategy. Right, let's get us home. Let's get us safe. Yeah. And she said, no, I think I'm going to have a panic attack, but I'll just sit it out, and then we'll carry on to the shops. Yeah. And she treated it like it's just going to be a few minutes, and then we'll get on with our day. And as a result of that, she didn't have a panic attack. She literally sat there for a couple of minutes, felt fine, and got on with the day. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the point here is that there's only one thing that can trigger a panic attack or any of those visceral symptoms, and that's what's going on up here. And the first step towards allowing that to cease is to no longer fear those feelings. Because if you don't fear the symptoms, if you don't fear the physical symptoms, there's no need for anxiety about work or finances or relationships to become that visceral, and now it's starting to choke me. Yeah. It can stay at the level that it's appropriate. The other thing I should say as well, apologies if I'm monologuing a bit here, but the other thing I should say is that it's perfectly okay to feel anxious. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it would be weird if you didn't. You've seen the TED Talk. The only two groups of people that don't feel anxiety, dead people and psychopaths. Yeah, human beings that are healthy and care about their own well-being will feel anxiety in any given situation on a daily basis. Our job is to make sure it's the anxiety that delivers the message, but doesn't now crowd our mind with all of this other stuff that stops us acting on the message. Yeah. So when you feel any physical symptom of anxiety, my message to you would be like, let's choose to understand what it's trying to tell me. Because all too soon, the physical sensations take our mind away from, oh yeah, I was anxious about that meeting today. Yeah, because that's the message there. The message isn't, here comes anxiety, look out, Brandon. You know, it's literally, oh, you're thinking about that important thing today. Yeah. And all that's happened then is any anxiety you feel about that thing, it's been interpreted as the enemy, the illness, the problem. And now you're focusing in on that feeling and amplifying it as a result of it. Yeah.
Does that help, Brandon? Does that give good insight? Is that something you already knew, but it's hard to execute on?
I knew, but it's hard to execute because like I've had these panic attacks where they were so major and I literally thought I was going to die. And
yeah,
and then I understood that I wasn't. And then like, if I have them again, I understand, well, it's going to like be 15, 20 minutes and it's going to go away. Yeah. But the biggest thing is I was going to go into the second point is like Dr. Google and being a hypochondriac. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because I've taken myself into an anxiety attack because of Googling. And what do you think?
Yeah, that's, I mean, Google is just, when anything wrong with us, Google's a bad idea, isn't it? It's like we're looking, when we
the
have
monster around the corner that you said earlier. If you're looking for a monster, that's scary in itself.
We're looking for the article that says, don't worry, that's fine. When, you know, with whatever we're Googling about.
Yeah.
We're not going to find that, are we? Because is that going to come up at the top of the Google search? Here's something not that interesting to suggest that there's nothing to worry about. No, the top of the Google search is, I had this and it turned out I then died the next day. Sorry, it wouldn't be in first person, would it? You know what I mean? There's that kind of thing. And it's like on the news, we only see interesting stuff. Yeah. And look, and all the social media stuff that gets shared. Nobody's sharing, I had a perfectly normal day today. Nothing interesting happened. That doesn't get all the likes and shares and gets reposted because it's boring. The stuff that is, you would not believe this thing that happened. Outrage as somebody dies of this that seemed perfectly innocuous and then wasn't. The news is the worst because it's so unusual. So yeah, Google can be great for our general information. You know, if somebody walks into my clinic and tells me I'm suffering with this and they name a condition, and I've got no idea what it is. Google's great. I can find out what the hell it is, yeah? But it ain't going to help me if I'm like, I've got a symptom. What could that possibly be? Because it will tell you everything. Yeah, my mum and dad had this book, right? There was a health book, and it was like a do-it-yourself diagnosis book. It was absolutely horrific. It was like a 70s book, I think it was, yeah? And it had little pictures, and it just had this flow chart. It was like, here's my symptom. Do you have this? Do you have that? And then it's a flow chart and you follow it down. And if you go the wrong way on this flow chart, at the bottom of the page, it's like got in a big red explosion, seek medical assistance now. This is an emergency, you know, and you can literally if you just take the wrong options. Yeah. And I think that sort of thinking, you know, you use the word hypochondriac. Yeah. I don't think that's a word people in my profession tend to use these days because it has such negative connotations. We refer to health anxiety, but health anxiety is the modern term for what used to be called hypochondria. But doctors will talk to you about the somatization of symptoms. What that means is we think about a symptom enough, we make it our reality. Yeah. There's this, it's a basic thing that us hypnotists and hypnotherapists know all too well. Your subconscious mind doesn't really know the difference between imagination and reality.
Yes.
And what that means is if you imagine something well enough, it will present itself to you as real. And that's the problem, is that we're not, when we fear something, what we're actually doing is imagining it as real. And that's why it
I love
creates
this.
its own reality.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. That's why I think not worrying is a superpower, because it's a superpower. It's a superpower. Let me ask you a question real quick.
Yeah.
I have noticed this throughout my life. I consider myself like very non-anxiety-ish. I have noticed that I've recalled stories with my friends that were negative, and I forgot them. Many times I've noticed that I have erased negative memories from my mind. And I'm always like, no, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. Is that the opposite of that? If you think about something too much and
there's a part of your brain, called the reticular activating system. Do you know about that?
No.
Okay, the reticular activating system is the part of your brain that decides what you notice and what you don't notice. So it's like a filtration system in your mind. Yeah. So it's why if we buy a new car, we'll drive off out of the showroom and suddenly we'll be driving around thinking, did everyone just buy the same car as me? I keep seeing it everywhere now, when we hadn't noticed it before. Yeah. It's like if we're in a bar and there's loads of conversations going on and we're not hearing any of the detail of the conversation until somebody says something that applies to us, like our name or our favorite sports team or something like that. And then we hear it because that's my brain. Right. It's like our smart speakers. Yeah. He says, through the risk of turning his own one on behind him. Yeah, I won't say the name. But it's listening for that one word that applies to it, so it will then wake up. Yeah, our brain does that. If you notice as well, the interesting effect, when a word jumps out of a conversation that wasn't your conversation, you also notice you just heard the words before it as well. Yes. It's not just a word that jumps out. You almost have heard the sentence, but your mind has been filtering it out until it applies to you. Okay. Now, what this means is that, back up a little bit. The way your mind decides what applies to you and what doesn't apply to you, all the things you've experienced throughout your life. Okay. So it's a bit like your Facebook algorithm. If I click like on somebody's post, Facebook will show me another one of their posts tomorrow. Yeah. If you notice something on Monday, you will then notice another thing similar to that on Friday, because your mind is now programming itself to be open to that content. So imagine if the earliest things you'd learned when you were a young child, a blank piece of paper with information being written on it without any filter to reject the stuff that you didn't regard as true, just everything going on there. Imagine if all you'd been taught because of your upbringing was the world is a dark place. Life throws you challenges and they overwhelm you. Then what's going to happen is you're going to find all the evidence as you make your way through life for all the negative stuff.
Exactly.
So Sean, what you're describing, I suspect, is whatever you've been through in the past, something about your early learning was the idea that, good things happen, I think. Life is pretty much, by and large, a good thing.
So my brain kind of like literally does like erase negative memories.
Yeah. And that's all it is. We don't, this is why two people can be standing in the same place looking at the same thing. Yeah. And see different things.
I'm like proud of that. Like I've noticed it like a little here and there, and like I've saw the pattern. Like wow, that's like 5 negative stories I forgot. I want to like give that to other people because I think it's a good thing. Erasing negative memories.
Well, that's the thing.
I'm not good at it though.
The thing is, I think you're fortunate. You're blessed that naturally your path has led your mind to develop in this way. Yeah. So, but also you cultivate that and you promote it and you lean into it. Absolutely. It's a little bit different when we've had our mind programmed through no fault of our own, but quite a negative outlook. Yeah. So, like I said, I was a kind of anxious, shy child. So when I went through a little bit of bullying, that impacted on me heavily because that was part of my, that early learning. Right. If I'd grown up as the opposite, say, outgoing, perfectly comfortable with people, that little bit of bullying might have just bounced off me. Right. I might have barely noticed it, if you know what I mean. But so our experiences leave us open to further experiences of a similar nature. That being said, we are not slaves to it. We're not purely.
You can start reprogramming at any time.
And that's it. And so what you would then do with a therapist or a coach or whatever is your sort of intervention of choice, if you like, you would then work on reprogramming that response so that you now more naturally lean towards the positive stuff, or you now more naturally lean towards the thought, I'll probably overcome this, rather than this will probably overwhelm me. Yeah.
That's why I love positivity.
That's what it's about, the work,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not.
It's work, Brandon. It's work. you have to work on if you want to reprogram a computer software, you have to sit up for hours and type buttons and stuff. If you want to reprogram your mind, you have to work on it.
I think the biggest thing though is I can put in the work, but I'm not consistent on the work. But it's like my brain can think a positive, but then like the subconscious always comes back. Either from
this is the thing. The subconscious is the powerful bit. So and it's the relentless bit as well. We consciously put effort in. This is why like cognitive behavioral methods are only as effective as the amount of effort we can muster to put into them. Yeah. So, and this is why my approach that I decided to learn was more based around dealing with the subconscious and reprogramming the subconscious. Yeah. Because then we hopefully get to experience change rather than trying to enforce it and trying to consciously push it through. So that's why I work with that model of thing. Let's deal directly with your subconscious. And
if you take a break from reprogramming your subconscious, you're different than a computer program. I feel like you're kind of starting all over again because you have to convince your subconscious. So that's where like the consistency in the programming of the subconscious mind matters. The consistency, right?
This is it. I'll tell you a little, my way of thinking of how it works. Yeah. You have a pattern of thought that you're running at the moment. Let's say I'm anxious about this or that. And you have a pattern of thought you would like to be running instead, saying I'm perfectly calm and confident in that situation. Yeah. Now, normally when our mind recognizes an upgrade, it just does it. Yeah. The example would be when we were crawling around as a baby, we learned to walk on 2 feet and we decided, hey, this is easier on the knees. I'm getting places faster. I'll do this from now on. Yeah. We upgraded because we recognized the benefits of it. Yeah. So the problem is here, we're really anxious and we want to be confident and calm instead, but we're not upgrading. Why isn't that happening? It looks better. The reason why it doesn't happen is because of these things in the middle, barriers. And these barriers take the form of subconscious objections, reasons why your mind says, yes, Brandon, wouldn't it be great if you could be this way, but you can't because this is currently true. And that's what the barrier is. And you got to work
through that one.
That's it. And that's what we've got to do.
Then you got the next one.
What that barrier is and change that. So, for example, the idea that we're ill is a potential barrier. I can't change because this is just who I am. Unless we remove that barrier, this doesn't become an option because obviously the ill person who is afflicted with anxiety cannot get to this calm, confident, peaceful, rested place. Yeah. So all of these, and that's generally what we're doing when we're trying to change these things, is working out what are those barriers. Yeah. Because your mind wants to remove them. It just doesn't regard it as possible right now for this or that or whatever reason, you know?
And you get through you get through one barrier, you feel good, but you got to get through all the barriers.
Yeah, that's it. To get there, you really have, you know. And sometimes it's just there's just one thing that your mind is struggling to let go of, you know, and that's holding you back in all these different areas. The number of times I've had people remove the barriers that are between them and the change they want, and suddenly they've made all these other changes as well, because whatever this was, the thing they removed, it opened up the entire, you know.
Well, that's how the subconscious mind works. It takes over your life when you have certain beliefs.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you got to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But are these limiting beliefs like able to be changed in years or decades? And that's like one of my biggest things is like,
depends how hard you work.
Yeah, like I've talked to like my mom, talked to like people like are older. They still deal with things, and it's like, well, you're 50, 60 years old, and you're still dealing with them. I mean, yeah.
Okay, look, when I'm working with people, we're looking to change it. Like, look, change happens in a moment, but we don't know when that moment is. So if we allow ourselves just to naturally evolve through it, it might take ages, it might take years, legitimately, you know,
or never if you don't work.
In the world, you know. But if we actually work on it and we break it down and we deal directly with the part of our mind that is holding this belief. So I don't suffer social anxiety anymore. Yeah. And there was a moment when I worked out, it doesn't freaking matter what other people think of me. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, there's still elements. There's still time. I like it when people hit like on my Facebook posts. Yeah. I like it when I get views on YouTube and it's thumbs up, not thumbs down. I get that. But I know I ain't going to die if somebody don't like what I'm saying. Yeah. And that realization was the moment of change. That understanding was the moment of change.
I think Brandon is looking for a specific amount of days, months, or years. Is
that
right, Brandon?
No, not really. No. I
I would just say, Brandon, I think the thing to remember is that change isn't just possible quickly. It's happened quickly all the time in your life, and you haven't noticed it, because it's like these things are quite binary. Do I feel this way or do I not feel this way? And we might recognize the shades of gray, you know, the more analog moments of going from here to here. But really, it's the starting of the journey where we let go of the old way of thinking and the old way of feeling, that then we generally, all of the work then suddenly reaps rewards. All the time we have those barriers, we're still tethered to the way we feel right now. We're still stuck there. So yeah, you do. I feel like it's unreasonable to expect your subconscious to let go of core beliefs without actually listening to that part, addressing those beliefs, and then helping it remove those beliefs, you know?
Yeah.
And you're right, it's not easy.
It's not going to be half an hour.
At its heart, it's not easy, but it is at its heart a simple process. The simpler we keep it, the easier it becomes, and the more direct it becomes. But again, I should say, this is my opinion here. You know, you're still, you could easily talk to people dealing in this area, and they'll say, well, if you've had it for a certain amount of time, you will have it for a certain amount of time. It will take this long to change it. I don't subscribe to that, because nothing about my experience personally and professionally bears that out. Yeah. I remember talking to some psychiatrists after the premiere of my TED talk, and they were saying, so how many sessions are you dealing with people for trauma? And I said, well, everything I do is a 3-session program. You know, we look to get the change. We look to consolidate with some extra sessions. And they're like, how on earth are you getting results with trauma in 3 sessions? And I didn't have a very good answer, because I went away and I thought, you know why I didn't have a good answer? Because I hadn't contemplated that it should take longer than 3 sessions. And it just seemed weird that they weren't doing it directly. Let's make a change kind of thing. So yeah, if I met them again, I'd probably have a better answer. But you know what I mean? I'm like, I don't know. That's weird, isn't it? You know, it's a model. It's the framework you're working on. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But,
yeah. Brandon, like, you feel like you have some tools now, or like you don't look, you're not smiling.
Nah, I don't feel like I've gotten the answers I wanted.
Yo, we got Tim Box here, a superstar, anxiety professional. What else you got for him, Tim?
What else have I got?
I don't know. This is a live session.
I know this is what we're doing here. This is why I'm on here. I can see now why Brandon was inviting me on here. It's like, right, I'm gonna get some free time.
I didn't really know.
You know what? It's everyone has their own journey to do here. That's what I would say. And we're not here to fix Brandon. Okay, let's make that absolutely clear. I'm here to talk about general principles.
Right.
What happens is, when I'm dealing with people one-to-one, when anyone's dealing with people one-to-one, it's not about, tell you what, Brandon, you sit down, I'm going to talk about anxiety at you for the next half an hour.
Right,
That's not how it works.
It's a different setting. It's a podcast. It's a podcast with thousands of listeners. Yeah, it's a different setting.
You tell me your story. And that then hopefully informs me of what your exact barriers are. Right. Why your mind is saying
the exact barriers. If you were going to sit down and take the time, you'd find the exact barriers and help them fight through each one.
Hopefully. But again, the other thing to remember is as well that I can't change anyone. They change themselves. Yeah. Right. And all we've got at the end of the day is what we perceive to be the truth. And I only tell people what I perceive to be the truth. And it's either going to resonate with them, or there's still going to be certain barriers there. But I tell you something right now, it's not about can I change, can't I change? It's about, right, the change I want to make, is it complete or is it incomplete? And if it's incomplete currently, we just got to do the work to complete it. It's about just working out what those barriers are and shining a little conscious torch on them and seeing, do they still apply? Do they still seem valid? Yeah?
I like that. I like the barrier and the torch reference. It's like a little knight in your brain fighting to get to the back to finally like save the princess in the subconscious mind.
Well, this is it. And I'll tell you something else. Someone's sitting there saying, do you feel better now, Brandon? Is that better? Do you feel, is it all cured now? That ain't going to help.
Of course not. I was hoping that maybe I have some of the tools to go for it. But I mean, me and Brandon talk about this stuff all the time. We're actually in the same building. We've been working together for a year.
That's brilliant.
But he said he was inspired by your TED Talk.
I'm glad it resonated. I really am.
But inspiration's the start of the work, right? Hey, like I told you I love this topic. It's one of my favorite things. I mean, do you have anything else to add? Like any other final thoughts, or like where people can find you?
Yeah, they can find me on my YouTube channel, Tim Box Mind Coach, and I have a podcast that I do with my wife Britt, who is another superb mental health advocate, and she's got some amazing stories about her journey through depression. And our podcast is Thinking Outside the Box.
I get it. Thinking outside the box. Yeah. Very good.
But people can find us there. They can interact with us as well. And it's just about getting the message out there and giving people a little bit of hope as well, you know.
All right, yeah. Actually, I have one final thought. I got this new piece of art that I like. Let me get it.
Okay. I was gonna ask you, Tim.
Oh, wait. All right. Okay, go ahead.
We haven't brought the subject of you being a hypnotist.
Oh yeah, cool, yeah.
All right. Well, we were wrapping it up, but
yeah. Well, I mean, you know, we can talk about hypnosis for a long time. But...
I got this art on my lap. I was just gonna say, this is one of my favorite movie scenes. Aim for the bushes, and like, I don't know if you've ever seen it from the movie The Other Guys. It's The Rock.
Yes, I have. Yeah, I've suddenly twigged what it is. Yeah, brilliant.
So they die, and this is why you have to have some anxiety. You can't just live life thinking everything's gonna be perfect. Aim for the bushes, and they die.
You know what? That is exactly what we end up like if we have no anxiety.
Exactly.
Jumping off the building thinking it'll be all right.
We'll be fine. Let's go.
Yeah.
So, of course, anxiety is normal, and it's okay, and it's natural. Yeah. And I thought that was a good ending, and I got this new art, so I thought it was cool. It's one of my favorite movie scenes ever because it's so funny. 2 movie stars, way overconfident. So a little bit of maybe we shouldn't jump off this building would have been a healthy response in that sense.
Would have been, exactly.
Tim Box, you're the man. Everyone go check out his podcast. We'll link it up. Check out his YouTube channel, the TED Talk, which has been seen by, I don't know how many million people, whatever. Really appreciate you. This has been fun. And thank you so much for coming on.
It's been a real pleasure. Been lovely.
Thank you.